Good morning, everyone. My name is Karen Meyer. I'm the Scholarly Communications Librarian at Kwantlen Polytechnic University, and I'm co-hosting this call with Michelle Braley. To begin, I wanted to tell you that this month's topic, as you know, is about ZTC programs and specifically about the nuts and bolts practical considerations for zero textbook cost programs. And I'm excited to introduce our speaker, Amanda Gray. Amanda Gray is a librarian who at the moment is the Open Education Strategist for the Teaching and Learning Commons at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. And she's in charge of the administration of our ZTC programs, for which we now, I think, have 8. And so it is a large part of her job, and she will let us know all the things we need to know as librarians about ZTC programs. So please, Amanda, take it away.
Hello. Give me a second to share my screen. There we go. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. Just to let you all know, this presentation is an adapted version of one that Karen and I gave at OE Global 2024. I've gone through and made some updates where needed. The slides for the original presentation are available in Cora, our institutional repository. And if I get a chance at some point, maybe at the end during our discussion, I'll drop the link in there. Before we begin, I want to take a few moments to mention that KPU's 5 campuses are located on the unceded and ancestral lands of the Kwantlen, who bestowed their name on our university. The Musqueam, the Kutsi, the Semiahmoo, Tawasin, Kikite, and Coquitlam peoples. These nations have lived on and cared for the lands that I work on since time immemorial. However, for long periods of time, and for some nations in BC still today, First Nations people have been removed from their traditional and ancestral lands. And the removal and disconnection from the land, compounded by over 150 years of damaging governmental policies, has resulted in inequality between First Nations peoples and the settler descendants who've been benefiting from being on that land. And in the context of this presentation, I want to acknowledge that a lot of what we're going to talk about is our processes and workflows, which very much fit into the Western colonial structure of our institution, and Indigenous peoples' traditions and ways of knowing and being often don't fit in these colonial structures, and can often slip through the cracks of these institutional structures. And addressing inequality is one of the primary driving motivations for a lot of people engaged in open education work. And open educational practices can be a significant tool for improving equity and giving students voice and choice. So we hope that our work here at KPU will have a positive effect on our Indigenous students and on the wider Indigenous community. So today I've been invited to speak about how KPU's ZTC initiative works on the ground level, the pieces that we have put in place in order to keep this thing going. However, this presentation is less about the specific processes, which I will still touch on, but throughout this presentation, I want to highlight the various departments across KPU that all work towards our ZTC initiative. This is not something that we could do alone. I'm happy to share our methods and tools, as well as any other information about how we went across this process. This presentation will be around 25 minutes because I want to leave plenty of room at the end for discussion and questions. And if you want to follow up with me one-on-one on anything I mentioned today, I'm always happy to chat. So at KPU, we often get asked to present or share about our ZTC initiative. And I'm not saying this to brag, but just to mention that there's a lot of information out there about what and how we do ZTC here at KPU. And I want to highlight these 2 in particular. So several years ago, I participated in a BC Open Education Librarians panel about ZTC textbook marking. And then the second one is that KPU is included as a case study in the Marking Open and Affordable Courses book. And the book case study goes into a lot more depth about the history of how we got started and some of our challenges at the very beginning. We're actually currently, or they are actually currently preparing to publish a second edition of that book. And we've written an updated case study on the progress that we've made and how the initiative has changed over time. So we're looking forward to that second edition being published. So for this presentation, I'm going to begin by setting the stage, or for the sake of this nuts and bolts metaphor, showing you our workshop and how things are laid out. Then I'm going to dive into a bunch of specific processes that we have in place to support ZTC. And I'm going to end with what we're currently working on to grow and support ZTC. So let's start by setting the scene with our workshop where the ZTC takes place. What is ZTC like at KPU? So we define a zero textbook cost course as one where students do not need to pay money in order to access course materials. And we've identified 5 specific methods instructors can use to achieve this. So they could just not assign any required textbook at all. They could be using an open educational resource. They could assign library resources. They could provide everything in Moodle, so put all their instructor notes, their slides, all the information that students need to know are in the learning management system, or they could use just free online resources that may not have an open license attached to them, but they're still accessible for free. Through the years, when we've collected data about which courses are going to be ZTC, faculty would always reach out to clarify whether their courses qualify. We used to have an open education working group to help answer these questions and provide guidance. And here are some of the decisions that we had to make along the way. And a consistent theme that emerged in these discussions, and now that we don't have a working group to answer these questions anymore, our guiding principle is that if students have control over the price of materials, so if they're choosing their own items, if they can choose between different products, if they can choose a lower priced alternative, then we would accept it as a zero textbook cost. So yes, we do consider homework systems and publisher platforms to be course materials for the purposes of ZTC designation, because students are required to pay whatever the publisher requires. Last year, we launched a new low textbook cost designation to accompany the zero textbook cost one. So the LTC marks courses where the cost of materials is $40 or less. So over the years that we've been doing ZTC, we've heard from several instructors who are unable to make their courses ZTC, but had still put in effort to lower costs as much as possible. So a good example of this is some of our science courses, where students are required to have print materials because they cannot bring electronic devices into the lab. Another common one is English literature courses, where students do really need to buy the book, but the book itself might only cost around $15. So we wanted to have something to acknowledge the work that faculty were doing to lower costs for students and contribute to textbook affordability, and give students a way to identify the course sections where the costs are a bit lower. And the key partners in the KPU Open and ZTC initiative at KPU are the Teaching and Learning Commons, where I work, and the library, where I work very closely with Karen. And of these two, the Teaching and Learning Commons is responsible for adoption data collection, process coordination. As Karen said, I do a lot of the more administrative work, answering questions from faculty, and then doing work with faculty to encourage them to choose ZTC options. The library takes care of making course materials available in the library collection where possible. We only accept for ZTC unlimited simultaneous users of online resources as counting towards the ZTC designation. However, this isn't always an option. Some publishers don't allow that. The library also advises on where fair dealing can facilitate the creation of course packs and help with other copyright and open licensing questions. So that's kind of setting the stage of the environment we're working in. Now I'll talk a little bit about our tools and processes for how our ZTC initiative runs. So the first partner I want to highlight here is the Office of the Registrar, which is responsible for scheduling and the timetable. So they provide information about upcoming courses for students during registration and make sure that it gets in the banner system. Up until 2024, information about which upcoming courses will be taught by ZTC was collected by Teaching and Learning, me, using an online form, which was sent to all faculty. We would clean up the resulting data and then send each capital F faculty a list of those courses. That faculty admin coordinators would add the ZTC information to the rest of the scheduling information and then send it to the registrar's office before the deadline. So in 2024, we worked with the registrar's office and the deans of each faculty to streamline this process so that now the faculties are collecting ZTC data along with the rest of the scheduling information and sending it to the registrar's office. So now rather than Teaching and Learning kind of inserting itself into the process, the work is being done a lot more efficiently and directly. And since we go through all the effort to make sure that ZTC is available for students when they're choosing their courses, we need to make sure that students are aware that they have this choice. KPU is a commuter institution, which makes it incredibly difficult to market to students. So here we've partnered with our marketing department to make a video showing students how to find ZTC courses, which the registrar's office has embedded into their guide on how to register for courses. And the marketing department has also created promotional bookmarks with a QR code to the video that we hand out during tabling events. We also participate in the orientation and transitions office to try to make it out to all of the new student orientations and the welcome week events at the beginning of each semester so we can let incoming students know about the ZTC program. Since KPU has 5 different campuses with events happening on different days, this does spread us out pretty thin, but we've been making a more concerted effort to have a presence at the event, and it's been really great. It's hard to gauge results and impact to know how much of a difference these tabling make. But anecdotally, I've definitely noticed in the past 2 semesters of doing these tabling events that more students were saying yes when I asked them if they've heard of ZTC, which is incredibly good to hear. Having ZTC set up in the banner for registration allows us to collect some good data, which allows us to track the growth of the ZTC initiative over time and see the impact that we're having. So I'm going to take a couple minutes to show you our data dashboard and the kind of data that we are able to collect. Give me a second while I pull this up. So, it's over on this side. Here we go. So this is our main ZTC page. This is our dashboard right here. The data here is all provided by the Office of Planning and Accountability. So they are constantly going through and checking the data and updating it at the end of the semester. We only started, when we first started ZTC, we did it manually for the first 2 semesters before we got it into the banner registration system. So we've kind of separated out those 2 semesters to keep the data consistent. But on this dashboard, we're able to look at the price of textbooks. So looking at how much we've saved students cumulatively within a single semester and then per academic year. We use an average textbook cost of $112.55, which I think this is coming from, if I remember correctly, a BC campus study came up with that number. And we are actually currently working with our bookstore to get book prices from our bookstore so we can get a more accurate number of what KPU specific average cost is. So we might be updating this number in the next year or so, depending on when we can pull that together. This also allows us to collect some information about how faculty participation. So every semester we have new faculty joining and running new courses as ZTC. The numbers vary, as instructors come and go, as things change, but it's always nice to see that every semester we do have new instructors coming on board. This page is where we can look at kind of the proportions. So we have ZTC sections, which is what the registration costs, and we can see how many sections that are being offered of a course are being run as ZTC. So for the past couple of years, we've been sitting at an average of 30% of the sections that we offer in of the sections that we offer during registration are available as ZTC. This is one where we look at the different faculty and departments to see how much of a department or how much of a particular course code, how many of their courses have ZTC. So the way that this works is a ZTC course is a course where at least one section is available as ZTC. It's very hard to keep track specifically because, of course, every instructor, it's up to them whether or not they're going to run their course as ZTC or not. So it gets a little bit weird at times, but this is what we've landed on a definition that works. So we kind of get a good sense of what the faculty participations are like. We always have to keep in mind that arts, being our biggest faculty, is always going to have the biggest numbers. So that's always something to keep in mind when we're looking at this data. Oh, that did work. Perfect. This breaks it down a little bit farther, each faculty and by their specific courses. And then the last thing is we are also able to pull some data in terms of the impact on students. So we can see that the DFW rate, so this is the number of students that receive a D, an F, or withdraw from a course, is lower with ZTC courses than it is for non-ZTC. We can see the average course grade points are higher in ZTC sections than in non-ZTC sections, and that the fill rate of ZTC courses is higher than non-ZTC. Although I always tend to take the fill rate numbers with a little grain of salt because this will often depend on, it's hard to know how many students knew in advance that they were choosing ZTC or not. But it's also kind of hard to discount that, even if they knew or not, for some reason, ZTC is always higher. So let me get back to the presentation then. There we go, this side. Okay. All right. So since we go, there we go, I went back. Okay. So that's a little bit about some of the data that we've been collecting. So up until last year, we had only been collecting data at the course section level, providing information to students about the individual courses that they register for. However, KPU does offer 8 full credentials that students can obtain by only taking ZTC courses. In the beginning, these degrees were tracked manually on pieces of paper, but while we were so that was at the beginning when we kind of figured out these are the credentials that we can offer. But while we got focused on the improvement of the course section tracking and that data, we kind of let the credential tracking fall off our radar a bit. So in 2024, we worked on creating a ZTC credential map and an interactive data dashboard similar to the one that I just showed you that allows us to look at whether any of our existing credentials are close to being available for ZTC so that we can strategically target those courses and work with deans and the department to see what needs to be done to make them ZTC. We also presented at OE Global about that credential mapping project, and those slides are also available in Quora. So, the last tool in our toolbox for supporting ZTC is grant funding for instructors to convert their courses to ZTC. So, we look at the credential map that I just mentioned and look for programs that are 1 to 3 courses away from being completely ZTC. We reach out to the deans and department chairs to let them know that we're willing to offer a grant to a faculty member to create or adapt an OER that will convert that course from non-ZTC to ZTC. The faculty member still needs to apply for funding and follow the same grant funding and adjudication process, but we know that the resulting OER will also have a strategic impact. Last section is we're always seeking to grow and improve our ZTC initiative. So here's some things that we're working on right now. So over the past year, not having to do the course marking process and having finished the credential map has freed up my brain to focus on other improvements that we can make. Since we've been doing ZTC for almost 10 years now, sometimes we slip into the mindset that everybody already knows about ZTC. But as I talk with more faculty, I'm really realizing that a lot of them don't actually know about ZTC. So definitely some improvements to make around our communications. And specifically, I want to take the time to introduce new faculty to ZTC so that they know to expect to be asked about it, and they know what it's about. When we launched the LTC designation, we put a lot of emphasis on informing the faculty schedulers and chairs about what this designation was, but we didn't do a lot to inform the actual faculty about what it is and how to do it. So that's on my to-do list for this year as well. And finally, I've noticed that ZTC will often get conflated with OER. So faculty assume that they need to be using OER for it to be considered ZTC. So I'm being a lot more careful with that distinction when I communicate. And again, just need to work on educating faculty on what ZTC actually is. So a lot of communications work coming up this year, and which I also need to remember to keep doing consistently and constantly, not just do one round of communications and then let it go for several years. This is something that we need to do on a consistent basis to make sure that the messages keeps getting out to people who may have missed it previously or to new people. When Teaching and Learning was collecting upcoming ZTC course information, we would always ask some additional questions about OER adoption and how their course was being run as ZTC. Now that we're no longer part of that process, we've created a new form and we send it out at the end of the semester. This form can now, the benefit of this is that we can now send this form specifically to ZTC instructors, and it allows us to gather some additional data that we didn't have room for before. This new form has been very successful, but there's always things to tweak. So what I'm going to be working on next is the timing. So next semester, I want to start sending it out the week before the semester starts, hoping to be less intrusive than reaching out during the semester when teachers are actively teaching and marking. The other thing that I'm going to be working on is doing a second round of the ZTC marking information. So this is something we used to do several years ago when I first started KPU. So we do the first round and get that information to scheduling. We would wait maybe 3 weeks or a month, and then we would do a second round asking again, just in case we missed any the first time. But we slowly stopped doing that second round. Again, we were kind of focusing on the process change and getting it more integrated with the scheduling. However, it's been a year of this. We've had a year of this new process of the ZTC course information being gathered through the scheduling process. And I know that some ZTC courses are still missing getting marked. This is partially because scheduling takes place so early in the semester in order to have the information available for registration. But it's taking place so early that some courses don't even have an instructor assigned to them yet. So I'm going to be looking at creating a second form for the courses that aren't currently marked as ZTC and sending it around again closer to the start of the semester to ask whether their course can be marked as ZTC and collect adoption information at the same time. So those are some things I'm going to be working on as well. And then lastly, there's always data maintenance. So we keep a list of known instructor course pairings that I need to update. We've been collecting the data, I just haven't moved it where it needs to go. And then once we have that list updated, we need to update our credential map that we created in 2024. So the credential map also needs to be updated with the changes that have happened to our programs, as well as new ZTC courses. And then lastly, the credential map has identified that we do actually have more than 8. It identified some credentials, ZTC programs that we weren't aware of, but I need to reach out and confirm that our map is accurate and those are actually ZTC programs before we can go out and start promoting those. So it's taken us almost 10 years. And as I hope I've demonstrated, it's taken us all working together to get us to this point. KPU's institutional commitment to open education means that our departments are all on board for making our ZTC initiative run smoothly. And although I'm the guest speaker for today's session, if you have any questions after this meeting or want to reach out directly, both Karen and I are happy to talk about this.